It's quite busy. You guys were quite busy over the weekend, over the holiday, huh? All right. All right. As I posted earlier today, I'll be here all day today and Thursday also. If you want to come by and go over your project, if you need help. If you can't make it, I'm always available on Google Hangout, or just call me on my phone. I'll be available all day for the next couple weeks. So not just between 5 and 6. Just feel free to call me at any time. The last couple weeks in the semester are always very busy. We're trying to get everything done. So I'm going to make myself more available this at the end of this semester. There are no more assignments, right? So we're done with all the assignments. So you should be just working these last, these 2-3 weeks. Just focus on finishing up the project. Okay. Again, I'll start looking at the projects early next week. Probably not on Monday, even though I said it'll be due on Monday. Probably won't be till Wednesday till I start looking at all your projects. And again, in a random order. Today we'll build a little application where you can register, put your name, your email, and then once I have all of you, I'll push a button and it'll randomize all your names, right? And come up with a random order, right? And then we'll post this order for all you to know more or less when you're gonna get graded. But it'll probably start mid next week. That weekend, right, of next week, it'll be where most of the grading will happen, right? So certainly, just plow through your project for the next, at least for this week and next, just full on. But always looking at your the order in which you're listed. I will contact you right before I grade you. Right, it says, I'm about to grade you. Everything. Make sure everything's pushed. That you have the latest in GitHub, right? That whatever you have posted on OpenShift, it's stable, right? So I'll give you a heads up if I'm about to grade you, perhaps the day before, just to make sure that, hey, don't touch anything for the next day or so as I am grading you. Yes.
Which site should we put on OpenShift? The assignment site or the project site at this point?
What do you mean?
We have the site that we've been developing for the homeworks.
Yeah.
And we have our project, right? We have 2 different sites.
Yeah.
So which one should we have actually up on OpenShift?
Well, both of them, because the TAs are not done grading your assignments. I'll be looking at I'll be focusing on the project.
Yeah.
All right. So whenever you get a heads up on the project that I'm about to grade your project, make sure that your project site is up and running and it's stable, and don't touch it for the next 24 hours while I am grading you, okay? I'm grading you, you're pushing something, the server's restarting, and all hell breaks loose, okay? So I'll let you know right before so that you can, just don't touch it for 24 hours so that I can look at something that's stable. Some of you asked, what if I can't get it to work on OpenShift? We'll always go back to as a backup using GitHub and running it locally. You will lose some points, right? Because it's not actually running on OpenShift, but it'll be some percentage. But most of you should be able to get most of the credit for the work that does work. Of course, if I need to clone it and work on a local database, I won't have all the data that you might have created, right? All the mock data you might have, right? I won't have that. unless there are some ways that you can configure MongoDB to when the server starts to pre-populate the database, right, with mock data, right? You might want to do that, right? That starts, it can pre-populate the database with some mock data, right? If you need to. For those of you that are using web APIs, you don't need to do any of that, right? Because the web API is just giving you all the data, right? So you always have data, for me to search or post or comment and whatnot. But for those of you that are not using a web API and are relying on all, your own database, right? If I need to clone it, right, on my server, I won't have that cloned, that pre-populated data, unless you create some script that, when the server starts, the first thing that it does is just pre-populates the data. Maybe loads from a JSON file, right, and just pushes all these records to a database. Clears out the database and just puts it in a stable. I mean, that you might want to do that. I don't know. Okay. Obviously, if it's running on the remote server, then you don't have that issue. Okay. Again, I'll give you a heads up right before I start grading it. Let's see what else. Okay. Obviously, I can't accept anything after. Let's see, that weekend. What weekend is that? This is November, December. Hello, where's December? Well, I have a calendar here, right? I have an agenda here. Last day of classes. Yeah, so these next week, starting next week, I can't accept anything after the 16th. That no, wait, that's Wednesday, 16th, 17th, 18th. So the 18th, after the 18th, I absolutely can't accept anything, right? Because I'm gonna use that last weekend, right, to just plow through everything that's left, and I can't have you, updating things at the last minute, right? But if you're the last one to be graded, certainly you have the most time than everybody else, right? You'll get lucky. All right. Okay. All right. Let's see. Let's. How do you mute this? Mute. Let me change this. Okay. Does that show? Yeah. See that? Okay, yeah. All right, so up to this point, the architecture that we've been using is that you have a browser here that is talking to a server, right, that is talking to a database, right? And then the browser, hits the server at a particular URL, right? Asking for typically index, and this downloads, right? Here's the index at the server. Downloads the index, copies it on a local hard drive, right, on your machine. This document refers to other documents on the server, right? It refers to CSS, refers to JavaScript, it refers to other files that live on the server, right? So CSS.js, right? And those are downloaded as well. Plus, it might refer to other JavaScript that lives outside, right, in the cloud, right? Maybe downloading a Yelp API or a Google API or whatever other third-party API, and that gets downloaded locally, right? So all these files are living here. Then your app.js, you have an app.js here, right? That takes over your entire page, right? It says, oh, you declared an Angular JavaScript application, right? And I'm going to take over your page, and it declares client services, right? Declares services, declares controllers. Here, all on the browser side, right? And then as the user, here's the user, right? As the user interacts with the page, right? The JavaScript controllers go back to the server to hit several services, right? Hit several services. The services here are mapped to models, right? So you have, in here you have some models that the services talk to the models, and the model use Mongoose to talk to the database, right? And the database comes back, and then comes back with JSON. So this goes back to with JSON, and then JSON is used here to then update the UI. So this is more or less the architecture that we've been using for the last several months, right? The application is mostly implemented here in the UI, right? It uses services to talk to server-side resources, and these web services maintain a server-side model with a database, right? But the rendering of the UI has always been here on the client, right? The client has dynamically rendered HTML. It has dynamically retrieved pieces of HTML, right? It has retrieved home.html, right? Or profile or users HTML. And these are all snippets of HTML, right? That dynamically are retrieved by the client, right? With using Ajax saying, oh, now I want to show this snippet or that snippet or that other snippet, right? The HTML gets downloaded dynamically, and the DOM gets re-updated dynamically using Angular's MVC mechanisms, right? So yeah, so the templating engine, is the Angular's templating engine, right? And lives here on the client. The controllers, the event handlers, all occurs here on the client. And this is a fairly new way of creating web applications, right? Where we move most of this to the client, right? But before all this, right? We spent several, almost a decade. All the rendering actually happened on the server, right? Those of you who have done JSPs with Java or done ASP in .NET, right? Or PHP or Python, right? You might have been more familiar with another way of rendering, right? Where the rendering is done on the server. The server is who's rendering everything, right? The client is just a dumb client, right? That only knows how to render HTML, right? But all that HTML came from the server, right? Over here, what we've been doing for the last couple of months, yes, we bring HTML right from the server, but it's static HTML, right? It's static HTML, right? It's always the same HTML. It's the client that uses JavaScript to dynamically update the DOM, right? Remove things from the DOM, update things in the DOM, right? Dynamically. But the HTML, the CSS, or the JavaScript, it's all static, right? It's all static. That's why we put it on the public, right? And public is the directory where we host the static content, right? But we're going to spend this week talking about another technology, right? That has a little bit fallen out of favor, right? But it's still very powerful. It's still a very useful technology, right? Where the rendering of the page doesn't happen here at the client. The rendering happens at the server, right? Server side, right? UI rendering. Okay. And again, this is if you've done JSPs, right? JSPs, or if you've done ASPs, right, or PHP, you should be very familiar with what we're going to talk about. Okay, we're going to introduce a new one, right? JSPs, ASPs, PHP, EJS. Okay, and the syntax is going to be very, very similar to what you've seen already in JSPs and ASPs. Right? Actually, it borrows heavily on that same syntax. Right? EJS stands for Embedded JavaScript. Right? And so instead of having embedded Java, right, in Java server pages, or instead of having embedded Visual Basic or C# embedded in ASP, we're going to have embedded JavaScript, right? And it borrows heavily, right, on these other technologies, right? So the same, the same kind of syntax where you have, pointy brackets, percentage, right? For those, this should be familiar to you if you've used some of these other alternative server-side technologies, right? We'll use, usually these are referred to as scriptlets, right? We have scripts that are embedded inside of pages, right? That in here you can embed code, right? Code that runs in pages, right? So these pages, as we'll see, most of it is just plain old HTML. So it's plain old text, right? You have HTML and body and whatnot and head, footers and whatnot, and then you have this several interspersed, right, content or dynamic content where you have a code that is where you can embed things such as if statements and loops, right, and functions and variables and whatnot, everything you would expect to be able to do with a full-blown, right, programming language. Now the cool thing about this is that this is going to be running on the server, right? This is going to be running on the server, and you'll have access to all the resources that are available on the server, right? Notice that when for the last couple of months running on the client was very was very limited, right? It didn't have any access to any data, didn't have access to anything. It was running inside of this this walled garden, right, inside of a browser. It had a lot of security. Provide some server-side technology, right, to make this any useful, right? We had to provide web services to be able to access data. On its own, the client, it was just it was very crippled, right? We always had to provide a server-side technology for it to be able to access server-side resources, right? Over here, embedded JavaScript and same thing as these other technologies, because they are running already natively on the server, they have access to all these things, right, on the server. They don't have to go out and do a network connection to get to anything. They are in the server, right? They have direct access to all the server resources, okay? Another thing is, if you have this server-side technology, and you have this client-side technology, if you can render content on either side, well, why would you want to do one versus another, right? Well, for more than a decade, we've been doing this programming, right? In the early this century, we introduced a model view controller, and Java and J2EE introduced this idea of using model view controller and these design patterns, right, in these applications, and these were all server side, right? Where the JSP was the kind of like the view, right? We had the servlets. If anybody did servlets, right? That was kind of like the controller side, right? And you had these Java beans, right? That were kind of like the model, right? That talked about the data, right? And slowly, this has been trickling. All these ideas of model view controller have been slowly trickling into client side. A lot of the ideas of model view controller that today we're looking at in client side development, MVC frameworks in JavaScript, these have been used in server side for quite a while, right? In version of control, injection, right? A lot of the design patterns that we're looking at today in JavaScript frameworks, they have been used for quite a while, and they're very, very mature on the server side, right? So somebody who's been in the industry for a while, right? And says, oh wait, isn't this what we were doing, 10, 15 years ago on Java side? It's Java or C# implementation or ASP implementations. And so these design patterns have made their way to the client side. But why one or the other? Now, why has it migrated to the client? It's migrated to the client because people, they've been using desktop applications for quite a while, right? And just desktop applications are very personal, right? You're using the application, it's running locally on your machine, right? And you start taking things for granted. You can drag things. You can, they're very responsive to you, right? It's your window running on your machine, right? And you can it's a different experience when you start using some of these web applications that they have to go back to the server. They have to re-render the entire page. They're less responsive, right? You understand that this is a very watered down experience, right? That you could have on desktop applications, right? Where it's using the full power of the machine on your desktop. And people say, well, why can't I have the same experience? Why doesn't my web application behave like some applications do, right? And so people start taking a look at this. How could we make web applications behave as responsive, right, as dynamic as desktop applications, right? And I guess I don't know if you'll remember when we first looked at Google Maps, right? I think that was my first interaction with a very dynamic application. The first time I grabbed the map and started just scrolling through the maps, this was like an epiphany for me. It says, oh wow, this is behaving like a desktop applications, right? This is very, very dynamic. It says all these maps are being dynamically rendered, right? Being dynamically downloaded. Obviously not. I mean, and you can zoom in, you can zoom out. And dynamically, all this is being fetched from a server, right? And somebody's doing this clipping and this and Google Mail, right? It says you're flipping between various views of the same application. This is behaving like a desktop application, but running on a browser, right? It says and then it just started from there. It was an avalanche of people saying, wow, we could do this if you use Ajax and these dynamic. And rendering all this dynamically on the client, we could have the same experience people have on desktop applications, right? So that's where a lot of these frameworks have been flocking, right, to the client side, and these single page applications have just exploded, right? And a lot of frameworks have come online, right? Dojo, right? jQuery, and certainly AngularJS, Ember. All these frameworks, the capabilities of creating these single-page applications, right? Nevertheless, server-side development has still, it's still relevant. It's still out there, right? It's still being used quite a bit, and it'll be with us for quite a while, right? Certainly, there are certain things that are still challenging on the client, right? If this is so dynamic, the content still has to be fetched from the server, right? So it could be that you come to an extremely dynamic page and you see all these spinners not loaded, right? Wait a minute, I still have to go back to the server to fetch all this content. And sometimes people get annoyed by this, right? It's so dynamic that I don't see anything. It's just blank, and things are it starts to fill up, as the content is being loaded dynamically, right? Especially if it's like the first page that you come to a website, right? When you come to a first page of a website, you want to see a full rendered page, right? You don't have the patience to wait for things to be loaded, right? I want to see something right away, right? So for that kind of implementation, certainly these technologies are still relevant, right? These are running on servers. They run extremely fast, right? They have the full-blown support of a full-blown machine, right? Running natively on that machine, right? They don't have to go fetch anything to a different network, right? And when they get rendered, right? When the whole page renders, just HTML goes, the entirely rendered page goes back to the clients, right? To be rendered on the browser. There is no fetching anything, right? Or perhaps images and things like that that still have to be downloaded, right? So for web page, you're looking to have extreme performance, right? That you want it to be rendered and not have to be dynamically filled up as things go, right? Certainly these technologies are still very relevant, right? Especially on splash screens, right? The first page that you see. Once you come in and you have the person hooked, right? That they're using your application, then you can give yourself you can start giving them the experience of the full desktop application, right? But certainly some pages that are critical. These technologies are still very relevant. Okay, make sense? So let's talk today about EJS. So on EJS or these server-side technologies in general, what happens is that you don't have these snippets of HTML, right? These are now snippets of EJS, right? EJS or JSP or ASP, whatever. We're going to focus on EJS, right? Embedded JavaScript. Okay, where what happens is that the client is no longer going to be asking for .html. They're going to be asking for something right? So the client is still asking for these pages, right? And what happens is that now the server is going to intercept this and look at the extension. It says, you're not asking for static HTML. You're asking for dynamic content, right? And this dynamic content, now, as I said earlier, this dynamic content might not contain anything dynamic, right? It might actually be just plain old HTML, okay? But it can, if it wants to, contain dynamic content, right? So in these EJS, typically most of the content of these EJS files old static HTML, right? With optional dynamic content, right? With optional if statements, optional for loops, optional whatever, right? And these embedded using these syntax, these pointy brackets and percentages that allow you to embed dynamic content in there, right? And what happens is that the server is going to look at this and says, it's dynamic content. That means, right, that this page needs to be compiled, right? It's not just plain old text. It's got embedded JavaScript in there. That JavaScript needs to be executed, right? And once it executes, right, either with a for loop or if statements and whatnot, the result of executing that content will be plain old HTML, right? This code, this embedded code, never makes it to the client, right? All this code eventually gets replaced by the resulting HTML, right? If it's a for loop embedded inside of, if you have some ULs, right, and here you have embedded LIs, right? You have a for loop in here. Right, that means that inside of this UL, I want to generate any number of LIs, right? Based on maybe some database query or some model or whatever, right? It'll generate a whole bunch of LIs. So at the end, when this makes it to the client, when it goes back, when the server finally executes your JS, right, and goes back to the client only sees HTML, only sees HTML. So this goes away, right? Replaced by as many LIs as that for loop generated, right? So the client never sees the code, never sees any code, right? It just sees the generated HTML, right, from that embedded content. Make sense? Right? Now, obviously, with these other technologies, you'll have like JSPs and ASPs. Those are compiled, right? They're the .javas need to be compiled into .classes, right? Same thing for C#. These PHP and EJS, those are interpreted, right? That means that there is no compilation, right? It executes right away, right? And that gets sent back once they are executed. Perhaps you could consider that ASPs are might be a little faster than EJS and PHP, right? But on server-side technologies where you have scalability and you have multiple servers running, right? All these, the differences of performance really is negligible, right? When you start considering that if these are running on the server, right? You can scale these having multiple instances of these servers, right? capturing, grabbing some of these requests, right, and handing it off to servers that might be with a less load, right? So whether it's interpreted or not, or whether it's compiled or not, it becomes negligible, right? These performances with the optimization, with other optimizations such as database pooling, and other things that become much more relevant for performance. Okay. So let's look at EJS. Again, I think it'll be very familiar to those who have done ASPs and JSP in other courses. Okay. All right, so the way to implement this, let me share my screen now. Let's see. All right, so to make use of the EJS technology, you're going to need to install EJS. Yes. Oh, thank you. Right, so to work with EJS, you'll need to install it as a module, a Node.js module, right? You EJS, and then the save, right? You'll install that, and that will download the EJS module, install it locally, and it will put it in your Node module. So we will have here Node modules. Notice that EJS has been installed. There it is, right? Plus, it'll make an entry in your JSON file, right? So we can say more your package JSON, right? So it'll make it a dependency. Okay, let me install it then. npm. Wait, why do I have it installed? Okay, I must have not done save. There you go. All right, so install EJS. And now it is a dependency in my project. There it is, EJS. Okay? All right, so this do the save so that when you deploy it to OpenShift, it'll also install EJS on OpenShift. First step that you'll need to do. The next step is that you need to configure your server. You need to configure your server to use EJS as the view engine, right? EJS is just one of many templating engines, server-side templating engines that are available at Node.js. Okay. All right. Pretty much that's it. That's all you need to do, right? Right. Just configure your Node server to use EJS as your rendering engine. You need a views directory. This views directory, right? This is the default. This is the default directory where you put your dynamic content. Okay, just like there is a public directory that we configured here. Where is it that we configured? There it is, right? Here's what we configured. We configured the directory where we're putting the static content, right? And that's where we put all our HTML, our CSS, our JavaScript goes in there, right? Our public directory. By using this line, we're saying we want to also be able to host dynamic EJS content, and that directory, the default directory where you put that content, is called views. Okay, so the server, right, is going to expect all the EJS files to live here under views. Okay, all right. And I have a couple of experiments here, right? All right. So let's see here. Here we have a hello.ejs, and this hello.ejs. What it's doing, it's just saying, do I even have dynamic content? I don't even have dynamic content. It's all static. It's just an H1 and a paragraph. That's all it is, right? That just says hello, right? So this is not even dynamic, right? But it's an EJS file. It's an EJS file. So I don't have any dynamic content here, but I could put some dynamic content here, like if statements and for loops and whatnot, right? But this is such a simple example that it doesn't even have dynamic content, right? Right. So here's my EJS file that lives in my views directory, and then the way we're going to host this, the way we're going to render it is that we're going to use this app.get. Right? What's that? We've done this before, haven't we? Right? You declare a route that says if you get. What does this do? This says if you get. Right. This says, hey app. If you get an HTTP GET request, right, whose URL is hello, right, /hello, and here's a function that's going to handle the request, right? There's nothing new there. We've been doing this for over a month, right? We've been doing this, so that doesn't change. This doesn't change. That in the response, what have we been doing in our response typically? We've been sending JSON back, haven't we? Right, we've been sending data back, right? Here what we're doing is saying, I don't want to send any data back. I want you to render. I want to send as a response, I want to render the following EJS template. The following EJS template, which is called hello, which is also the same thing as hello.ejs. The EJS is optional, right? Because all files under views, right, are expected to have .ejs. So putting the .ejs is kind of redundant, right? It's understood, right, that they all have EJS at the end. Okay, so you can put it there or not. It's the same thing. It's optional. So when we say response render hello, it's going to render wherever hello says. What does hello say? It's this. Hello, this HTML template is rendered on the server using EJS. Okay? And let's see if we have that. I don't remember. Did I leave it here? I forget. I don't remember if I left it in here. Hello? I guess not. Maybe I have it. Let me see. Maybe I moved it elsewhere. So if I go here and do a hello, okay, no, okay, I must have moved it away. So yeah, so let's get that working. That is this example working. If I copy this, somewhere, right, and I restart my server, right, and I refresh, there it is, right? So what I've done, it says, right, so when you see a get request, and that's exactly what a browser does, right? When you type a URL at in this input field, right, and you press enter, the browser generates a get request, right? And who gets this? Who gets this request? Our server, right? And our server, we've configured it so that if you get a hello, we render the HTML. Basically, what we've been doing so far is things like this. We're sending JSON, right? Something like, message hello, right? This is what we've been doing for the last couple months, right? Just returning data. We've been using our server only for data purposes, right? For JavaScript clients that are reaching out for data from the server to render their content dynamically, right? That's what we've been using our server for, right? Things like this, right? So this is more or less what we've been doing, right? Generating JSON, dynamic JSON, right? For rendering on the client, right? Here, what we're doing is saying, no, we're not going to do that anymore. Well, not anymore, we're also going to be able to render dynamic content on the server, entire JavaScript content that have embedded HTML in them, right? Or vice versa, entire HTML content that have embedded logic in them. Okay. So yeah. So here's if we restart the server, right, and we say this with this content, this HTML. So this is content over here, right? This one right here, right? This HTML template is rendered on the server using EJS, right? Using EJS, the following route, right? Oh, okay. I moved it elsewhere. Yeah, I remember now. Last night, I moved it to experiments. I moved it under experiments / EJS / hello. Yeah, that's what I did. I moved it elsewhere because I needed many experiments, right? So I moved it under this URL, right? So experiments / points to the same hello.ejs file, right? Renders the same EJS file. Okay, so this is you load the Express, you set the EJS rendering engine to be EJS, and then you map your URLs to whatever EJS file you want in there. Everybody okay? Everybody still with me? Yes.
So are we allowed to change the DOM for the EJS?
I'm sorry?
Are we allowed to change DOM?
The DOM?
EJS? Yeah.
Sure. These not only are they rendering HTML, right? That HTML could have links to Bootstrap, right? Could have links to Angular, right? So what you could do is to generate a page very fast, right? A static page, well, not a static. It runs on the server. It generates the HTML dynamically on the server, and the content, right, is pushed as plain HTML to the clients, right? Very fast. And then that HTML client could be an Angular application, right? And the Angular application, now that it rendered very fast, right, without anything, right, can now take over the page, right, and now become a single page application, right? So it's a very common thing, right, to use EJS or some form of server-side rendering, yes, coupled with, right, JavaScript to then take over, right, over the dynamic content of a single page application. It's a very common technique. Yes? Right. Right, or jQuery or whatnot. Yes, that takes over the some MVC technology. Right. But today, let's focus on what can you do with EJS. Right. We already know what to do on the client, right, with JavaScript and jQuery and Angular. Let's see what you can do with EJS. Pretty much you could do almost everything, right? The only thing that we'll notice is that because it's being rendered on the server, right, you'll start seeing these applications flicker, right? We'll see that we have to go to the server for everything, right? And usually what happens is that the entire page gets re-rendered, right? Even if it's a little snippet of the page that's being modified. Maybe I'm adding a new row, right? Or I'm doing something very small on a page. The entire page gets re-rendered, right? Which is one of the things that made applications somewhat hard to use, right? When an entire page needs to be re-rendered, right? And that's why Ajax-based applications started to become more and more popular, right? Because you could update only snippets or small portions of an application without having. So let's see what can we do here. Let's create here a directory for our lecture. Okay, for views, and in here let's try something simple here. Okay, let's create just a clean file and see if we could create this EJS from scratch, right? So we'll just say hello here. All right. Okay, so we want to render this. What we're going to do here is on our server, right? We're gonna create an app.get get, and we'll say if the incoming URL says lecture/ejs/hello, I want to render request response. I want to render this, the file I just created. Where I put it? Where did I put it? It's under views. It's under lecture. Right. That means that if I type at my URL /lecture/ejs/hello, right, it's going to render that page I just created. Okay. Let me restart the server. Right, so if I come here and now I use that URL I just created, let me copy it. Right, it should render wherever the file hello.ejs, right? It's this one right here, under lecture, under the views directory, right? It should render this one. Where is it? No, not that one. Where is it? This hello. Right, so let's do enter. There it is. It's this hello. Right, so I created it, right? Are we okay? All right. So actually, a better name here. Let's create something new. Let's create intro, right? Or some intro. Let's create intro.ejs. Let's create another one, right? And in here, let's create h1 intro to EJS, right? So let's go back to our server. I'm going to map another one. We're going to map another one. We call these routes. We're creating a route here and saying that this route maps to this content, right? So EJS, let's put intro. It's called intro. It's gonna map to my intro.ejs, intro.ejs. Okay, I need to restart the server. Right. All right. So the mapping now is intro here, right? So let's say intro. There, intro to EJS, right? It's that page I just created, right? Which only contains HTML for now. Okay. Right. So what could you do with this, right? What can you do in EJS? Well, you know, you could create variables, right? You can say variables, so you can say variable A is equal to 1, 2, 3. Right? These pointy brackets percentage says everything outside of these pointy brackets is just static HTML, right? It's verbatim text. Right? Everything inside of the pointy brackets percent, right, is dynamic. It's code that is not going to go to the server. It's not going to go back to the client. All this is going to be blanked, right, or substituted by some text, right? Either a blank piece of text, like for instance this var, right? If I go back, right, and I re-render, notice that it didn't make it, right? It did not make it to the client. Now, even if I look at the page source, you see that the code didn't make it in there, right? Right. If I notice that if I put content here, h2, it says variables, and I reload. Notice that the content is making it there, right? But notice that the code is not, right? Code is not making it back. If the code has for loops, if statements, and whatnot that generate content, then that would make it in there. Okay. So for instance. This declares a variable, and then this other one, for instance, just prints out the content of a variable, A. This says, evaluate the expression, whatever expressions is in there, and replace it with its string representation. So what's A? A has a value of 1, 2, 3. What's its string representation? The characters 1, 2, and 3. Yes? So notice that has the equal there. See, equal says evaluate the following expression and then replace it with its string representation, right? So let's reload that. Notice that there's a 1, 2, 3 now in there. You see that? Right? And this is being rendered here, right? If I refresh, there's a 1, 2, 3. Okay. You know, I could do certain things as var b, right? And then I can have full expressions in here, A plus B, right? So I could just. And then it's 357. But notice that the content, only you only get, right, this results of having executed whatever code you have there, right? The code never actually makes it to the client. Only the compilation is that it executes the code, and whatever HTML or static content, that's what makes it to the client. Make sense? Yes? All right? Okay. Right? So for instance, I can have variables age, right, and says this is 21, and then you can have if statements, right? You can have, actually, let's put this in here. Let's call this h3. Evaluate expressions. Right, so this could be, a plus b is equal. Right? There it is. A plus b is 357, right? Or you can have if statements, right? You can have h3. Oops, h3 conditionals. You can have, you can say if, right, and then age is greater than or equal to 21, then the output could be, right. You can have output. You can have, for instance, let's close this. So if this is true, then we're going to render Alice can drink. Right? Let's close this. Then you can have an else. You can have an else, right? And then you can close it again. Alice cannot drink. Right? And then close this again. All right. So let's draw. Let's make this a little bit easier to read. Right? So you have an if statement here, right? And this says, here I'm in code. Now I am no longer in code. So this is static inside of code, right? And then I am no longer in code. So this is plain old HTML, and this is plain old HTML, right? So what gets rendered? Which content gets rendered? Either this one or this one, depending on what? If the age is greater than 21, right? So there it is. So age is 21. So presumably, Alice can drink. Yes. So if I render this, Alice can drink, right? But if I change Alice's age, right, to be 18, or is that the what did I do? Oh, I have an S here. What the heck? Alice cannot drink. You see that, right? And the content, notice that the content, either one or the other gets rendered. Alice cannot drink, or if I change the code, right, to be 3, the render, it says Alice can't drink. You see that? Either one or the other content gets rendered depending on that variable, right? Which gets executed on the server. The server decides, right, depending on that if statement. Okay. So you have if statements, right? You can have other things, right? So wait, I can't read this, can you? Let me make this a little bit easier to read. There we go, that's a little bit easier to read. Some people like to be very verbose. This might make it easier to read like this. Is that easy to read? There we go. That's a little bit easier to read. So yes. The HTML, yep.
So why do we get S2 there?
Where?
Between the variables is inside the S2 tag. Why is it so?
The variable, this? Oh, that's what we have, right? Right here. It's static content, right?
But it should be bold because it is a header.
Yeah, no, this is the code, the source code, right? This is the actual HTML, right? I was just looking at the generated content. This is the generated content, right? Okay. Yep. Yeah, this is the text that comes back, right? And this is the actual rendered. Yep. Okay. I was just wanted to point out that source code does not make it back to the server, as opposed to JavaScript, right? In JavaScript, your app.js, your config, all your controllers, right? All your services, all that is source code, right? That is downloaded from the server, goes back to the client. Everybody can see your source code, right? All your JavaScript source code is available to anybody who wants to look at it, right? Usually a lot of usually the application that gets downloaded, right? It's only a front end, right? But none of the security enforcement, none of the business logic, right, is usually made available on the client side, because usually that's business secrets, right? None of that business logic. You want to make it available to anybody who wants to download your JavaScript, right? All that still should exist on the server, hidden behind, well-defended web services, right? That are using some business logic that implement all the business rules on the server side, right? Okay, that should be, the difference, right? Everybody still okay? All right. You could have other things here. So let's create more things here. So let's create here H3. You could have arrays, right? So you could declare arrays here. So you can have var students, right? And array, sorry. You might have several students here, right? You might have username, Alice, and have several users here. So username, Bob, username, Charlie, then username, Dan. Okay, and then from in here you do for loops, right? So you can do for loops. You can say, let's put an H4 here, students. You can say, let's do a for loop here. You can say, for var s equals 0 all the way up to s less than students.length s plus plus, right? As I iterate over this, I want to display these students, right? And I want to display them maybe inside of a UL, right? And as I iterate, my dynamic content, my template will be, I want to go back to HTML. That's why I closed off, right? I closed off the code. I want to go back to HTML. Right? I want to render an LI. Inside of that LI, I just want to display a username, right? So I can say, I can reference this variable going back to the code, right? I can say, evaluate the following expression, which is students sub s dot the username, right? Right, and then I close on it. It says, okay, that's the expression I want to evaluate for each LI that I am rendering, right? And then finally, I want to finish off, right, going back to source code. Okay. So if I go back and I re-render this, there it is, UL, right, and all the rendered LIs after that, right? And then if I render this, there they are, students, Alice, Bob, Charlie, and Dan. Okay. Obviously, this is all static content, yes. But just as well, we could go back to we could go to the database, right, and query, use Mongoose, just the way we've been doing, right? A model, Mongoose, and web services, right, to retrieve data, and the data can be then used for dynamic access here. Make sense? Everybody okay? All right. We could just as well get data also from the client. Our incoming client could send us data, right? So for instance, in our intro, we could send data, right? We could send data as part of a jQuery, as a part of our query string, sorry, where we can say, you know, x is equal to 23, and y is equal to 234, right? And we could, you know, grab that from the query string, right, and then render it here. We like to be able to do those kinds of things, or we can go to a database and retrieve data and render it here. So let's see how we could do that. Let's see how we could do that. So on the server in this intro, right? In this intro, what we could do is have data right here. We could say, I'm going to send some data to this template. I'm going to send some data to this template. So data. We could do is this array here of students. Bless you. This array of students could live on the server itself, not on the page, but on the server, right? Right. Maybe this could be faculty, right? And this could be maybe Edward, Frank, Greg, and Herbert. Okay, and I can send this data. I can create a var data. You can create an object and says the faculty is this array called faculty, right? And send the data. I can send the data to the template. Hey, template, here's the data, right, that I want to send to you, and now you will have access to it in that page, right? So, for instance, right, if after arrays, we could say here h2 data from server, right? So we have the data. What do we have here? We have faculty inside of data, right? So we could say I want to print the faculty. That variable now that is being passed to me, right, is now available in the scope of the. Oops. Oh, I need to restart the server. Every time that you make a change in the server, you need to restart it. So let's restart this. Okay, there it is. You notice at the bottom, right? It displays a comma-separated, right, list of objects. See that? How many are there? 1, 2, 3, 4. That's how many faculty I put in that array, right? Right. So it doesn't know how to render the JSON of it, right? But this is as close as it can get to the string representation of these objects to render these. But right, we could, just like we iterated over the students, we could iterate over the faculty, right? Right. We could certainly we can render the length, right? To know the array, right? We know there's 4 faculty members that we added there, right? So if we render this, notice that it'll render us 4, right? So that's how many faculty there are in that array you just passed me. Okay, right, and certainly I can we can certainly have a table here that renders these, right? TR, right, and I want to render in here what TD. We want to render each faculty we want to render the faculty username, and we want to render how many rows do we want to render? As many faculties as there are, right? So that means that we want to wrap this table row inside of a for loop, right? For F in faculty, okay? Open. Okay, what do we want to do? We want to do those table rows, and then we want to close. Okay? And in here, what do we want to render? We want to render faculty sub f dot username, right? There they are, Edward, Frank, Greg, and Herbert. You see that? Right? Again, this is data that is being passed to us from the server to the template, and then the template has access to the variables that you have in the data object. Okay. Now, but just like the server is providing the data over here, which is a static piece of content, just as well, we could do a mongoose call, right, to a server, right, to the database, and retrieve data from the database, and then pass it along here. You see that? Okay. So let's see what piece of data do I have in Mongoose. We have MongoDB running. Let's go to Mongo here, and let's see what do we have. Let's see. We have. It looks like I was playing around yesterday with some data here. Show DBs. Okay, so it looks like I probably in this database, right? So we can say use this database. Oops. No, that doesn't exist. And then I can show the collections in here. I believe the collection I was playing around was with this one, the db.experiments.ejs.course. And I have a couple courses in there. So I bet it's this one, no? It's which one? This one right here. I don't know if I have a model to hit that database. Let's create a full-blown example of how to do this. Okay. Actually, before we do get to that, I wanted to show you just one more thing. Right. So say you have here in your HTML, you have a form. All right. So let's do a form here. So H2 forms. Okay. Forms. And the forms, you create a form here. Form. Oops, sorry. Been working with forms and data inputs, right, and input fields. The way we've been working with this is that we create a controller in Angular, right? And this Angular controller, it gets invoked whenever you click on a button, and we have an ng-click, right? And the ng-click calls the controller and says, hey, they clicked on this button. What do you want to do, right? And the controller, what it does is that it has a model associated to each one of these input fields, correct? Right? And what the controller does is that it gets from the model all the piece of information, it creates an object, and then it passes it on to a service, right? What it does is it uses HTTP to post the data to a server. All this through using the underneath AJAX support, right? The page is never submitted. The form is never submitted, right? Underneath, it uses AJAX to, right, quietly post the data to the server. And then we have somebody on the server side listening for the post, receives the data, and then it does whatever it needs to do, either inserting a database or whatnot. Everybody okay? Right? But here, we're no longer going to do that, right? Here, we're going to go back to the way we used to do this, right? In the past, instead, in non-single page applications, forms actually were submitted, right? When you press the button to submit it, it actually, right, grabbed all the input fields in the form. It created a package, right, and it posted the data to the server, right? And then, right, it went wherever the server told it to redirect, correct? This was kind of like the old way of doing it, and I wanted to demonstrate this to you. Okay, so we're going to say that we want to post. We're going to say that the action is that, in the way you used to do this is that you would say this form is going to be submitted to this particular URL who's going to handle this post. Okay, so what we're going to do here is going to say we're going to post to the following lecture /EJS/form. Okay. Form. So it's going to post there, and then you can say that we want to either use a get or a post. Okay. If you remember, because of RESTful APIs, the way we've been designing things is that if this form data was because we were adding new data, we were using post, right? If it was modifying existing data, we would use a put, right? If it was just retrieving data, we would use a get, right? Or if it was deleting data, we would use a delete. Yes. Well, this form here it predates this notion, right, of RESTful web services, and you know it's somewhat of a low-level mechanism, right? And you could choose either get or post, right? We could choose either to encode the data in the form either in the URL, right, as name value pairs in the URL, or we could decide to encode the data in the form as part of the body of the HTTP request. Either one would work. It says, well, why one or the other, right? You know, both work, right? They both transfer the data from the form, from the user interface to the backend. They both do this, except that get, since it uses the URL to encode the data, there are limits on what you can encode, right? Because that URL has limits, right? Each browser handles the URL differently, right? Some of them truncate the data, up, when it gets too big, right? More than 255 characters, right? So if you have a long paragraph that you're posting, right, it would not fit in 256 characters. It would be truncated. For large pieces of data, it's best to use post instead, right? But when there's no truncations, the data is posted and whatnot, right? But let's use get for now, just to illustrate what happens, right? Because it's a nice experience to see the actual data being encoded in the URL. So let's see. Let's put a form here. Let's put an input field. Let's in the input field, we're just gonna put this input field. The way it works is that when the form gets submitted, it's going to take the name of each input field, right? And those are the names of the fields that it's going to use, right? So for instance, if I use here title, I'm sorry, name, right? It's a name, and I say title, okay? Let's have a couple of here. A title, I want maybe a number of seats. So I say I want to create a new course, right? So I need to know the title of the course, the number of seats available, and the date that it starts, right? Start. And this is the type here is that this is just plain old text, right? And the type here is that this is a number, and the type here is that this is a date type, right? Right. And if I render this, yep. Notice that because it's date, it knows that it's going to use a date widget, and it's just number. Notice that it uses a up and down because it knows it's a number, and this is just plain text, right? And then we'll put a button here to submit it. Right? We'll put a button at the end. We'll say button. Oops. A button, and the type here says a submit button, and it says submit. Right. So this is a very common way, right, that you would post data to the server, right? So if I type the data, right, when I submit, notice what happens. Look at the URL at the top. You see that? Look at that. It has title equal what I typed there, right? Then the number of seats, and then the start. You see that? Okay. So that's the way the form gets submitted to a server, right? To some back-end resource, which we told it's called lecture/ejs/form, right? And because we chose get, it encodes the data in the URL, right? And you understand that if this were a text area where you can type in large paragraphs, right? Imagine that text would be encoded in that URL, and that URL can be easily truncated, right? And the data might not make it to the server. Instead, typically if we know that we're going to have large amounts of data, or data we don't want people to have it encoded in the URL, we would use instead a post, right? If we go back, my phone. Sorry. Here we have the intro, right? If we type in the course Java 101, right? I submit. Notice that now that I submit, notice that it's not encoded in the URL. You see that? It's not in the URL anymore. It actually gets encoded in the body of the HTTP request, right? And it gets sent to the server. But notice that it's complaining that there's nobody at the server that knows what to do with this data that you sent over, right? It says, what do I do with this? The client, the browser is complaining that the server doesn't know what to do with that data. Okay, so what we're going to do is that we are actually going to, on the server, we're going to receive that data. We're going to say, oh, okay, you're posting it where? You're posting it here, right? We're going to respond. We're going to listen for that incoming post. That's what this says, right? I'm going to receive that incoming post for that particular URL that it's incoming, right? And what I'm going to do, right? This is the logic that I want for the incoming piece of request. I'm going to have the request and response. What I'm going to do, I'm just going to say, since it's a post, right? It's inside of the body. So there is a var the data. Then I'm going to retrieve it from the request from the body of the request, right? And for now, I'm just going to print it out. I'm going to print it out. I'm going to say data. Right? I'm going to restart the server. Okay. So it should display here. It should display right here. Okay. So let's go back. Intro, and let's refresh the page. And down below, we'll say that this is EJS 101. There's 23 seats available. There's a date, and let's put this to the right-hand side, and let's submit the form. Okay. Notice that there it is, right? The server grabbed the data, right, and it made it to the server, and the server gets an object, right, that's encoded with the data that was sent over from the client, right, with the title, the seats, and the start date. Now the server is free to do whatever it wants to do, right? It could insert it in a database, right? You do whatever it wants, right? But it makes sense, right? We made it to the server. Notice that, and it stayed in the same. It stayed in the same page because the server. Notice that you see this. It's spinning still at the top. You see that it's spinning. It's waiting for a response from the server. The server never responded. Right? The data made it to the server, but the server never responded. The client is still hung, waiting for the response from the server, right? It'll time out eventually, right? If I stop the server, then the client says, oh, I could not reach the server. So the server should respond. The easiest thing to do from the server is to send them either to a page that has a result or something, right? Or we can send them back where they were, meaning stay in the same page, right? We could say response render, right? And the same page. It says, I want you to stay in the same exact page. Oops. Or we could send them to some other page, right? Right now, we're going to tell them stay in the same page, in the same intro page, okay? The thing is that it's going to complain because notice that what's that intro expecting? What's that intro page expecting? It's expecting this faculty, right? It's expecting that data faculty. So if I send them back to that page without that faculty, the page is gonna crash. It says, oh, I don't have a faculty, right? Because notice that it's being rendered from a separate place, right? It's being rendered from this post, right? So let's do this, right? Let's go back. Now let's restart the server. Okay, let's go back. Intro. Let's refresh the page. Okay, that's fine. It still works. It still works. Why? It works because, right, this is a get. Yes, it's a get. Every time I do an enter here, it's a get, right, with that URL, with this URL. And it's being handled by who? Right here, right? This get, right? And that's the URL. And that's what it says, render intro.ejs with this data. run. It's going to receive the data. It's going to receive the data, but it's going to send them back to the same page. But I'm not going to provide that data. Right? It's going to complain. So here I have EJS 234 12 submit. Okay, there it is. Right? It came. It went. It got the data. Right? The data made it to the server. The data made it to the server, but it's not complaining that you're asking for the length of an undefined object. See that? The data, because I'm not providing the data anymore. That data really should live somewhere else. Maybe the data should be, maybe, let's see, let's put this at a global, let's make this a global variable. Let's make this a global variable. Now it lives here. Now it's a global variable. Yes? It's global. So now I can provide the data to both, right? The get and the post. Right, the post, both of them have the same data. Let's restart the server. Okay, let's go back. Right, and let's send here this EJS 457. And let's submit. Oops. Faculty length. What? Did I restart the server? I did, didn't I? Web storm, blah, blah, blah. Faculty is not defined. Faculty is not defined. Here's data. Here's faculty, data, data, data. Oh, it's got a local variable called data, right? It's got a local variable called data that it's shadowing, right? It's shadowing the global variable data. So I'm going to call this something else. So I'll call this course, in course, right? Course. There we go. Now there's no ambiguity of what data is. So let's restart the server. That's why I hate computers. They take everything so literally. Let's refresh. This is Node.js 3, blah, blah, blah. Submit. All right, comes back. Notice that the page refreshed. You see that? The page refreshed. Notice that it reloaded, right? It flickered. And notice that it went back to the top. See that? It went back to the top because the entire page reloaded, as opposed to what we've been doing for the last couple months, right? In the couple months, we never refreshed the entire page. We only, updated the pieces that we needed, right? The desktop application would, right? A desktop application, you render and updates the different pieces of the desktop application, never the entire page, right? Only what's needed. So that's one of the things there that notice that it had to re-render this entire table again, right? Even though I was interacting with this form down here, it had to re-render this table again. It had to re-render this UL again, right? Even though I didn't touch any of that, right? Those are the disadvantages, right, of using this older technology, right? That you're recomputing the entire, right? You're reusing, I mean, you could be as fast as you want, but you're misusing resources, right? You're misusing computing things that never changed. Why even bother recomputing them if they never changed, right? Also, you're generating a lot of chatter, a lot of traffic, right? It was unnecessary, right? Even though a small piece of the page changed, the entire set of HTML what was re-rendered, right? The entire content was sent back from the server unnecessarily. All right, let's see. Okay, so we worked there. We showed you that we can receive data. What do you do with this data? Basically, what we want to be able to do is interact with the database, right? So let's now create a little application that can store data in the database. It can retrieve data from the database and whatnot, right? So let's play with that. All right, let's create a complete separate application on the lecture, and we'll create here a directory of EJS, interacting with a database, right? It's a little more involved. For example, we'll start today, and I don't think we'll have enough time to finish it today, but we'll keep working on it on Thursday. So let's create here MongoD. I'll call it Mongo. So a whole directory called Mongo, just to show you how EJS might use a database, right? So let's see. Let's create here. Very similar. We'll have here a models, right? We'll have. Let's see. App.js. Okay. Let's see. And oh wait, where am I putting this? Oh, I'm putting it under views. I'm sorry. I don't want to do that. I don't want to. Here, I only want to put stuff that gets rendered, right? A model, right? It's meant to be server side only, interacting with database. That doesn't get rendered, right? So I'm sorry. Let me move this out of the way here. Sorry. Let me move that. Let me move that. Let me move directory here for lectures. Lectures, and under here, let me create a directory called EJS. And in there, I'm going to move my example of using Mongo with EJS. There we go. There we go. Okay. Okay, so let me create this app here. Right, it's going to be a module. Exports function, and it's going to receive app, and it's going to use Mongoose. Okay, and this is that app I just created. So require // lectures EJS Mongo, and then in there I have app.js, and I'm going to pass it as arguments. I'm going to pass it the app and Mongoose. Okay, Mongoose is the live database connection to the current database. Yes. With that, we'll create schemas and models and whatnot. Yes, it'll talk to the database, and app for creating our gets, our posts, and whatnot to interact with the client. Yeah. Notice that the client is no longer the. I mean, yes, eventually makes it to the browser, obviously, right? But the client here, it's much closer to the server, right? It's being rendered by EJS. It's being rendered by the server, as opposed to being rendered on the browser by Angular. See that? So that client is much closer to the server, rendered at the server itself. Anyway, so we have this here. Let's see if we're hitting this. So let's say here console.log EJS Mongo example or lecture. Okay, let me restart the server, and let's see if indeed we are making it into that app. There it is, EJS Mongo lecture. So we're making it into that app.js. Yes, we're making it in there. Very good. What we want to do here is we want to render our UI, and let's create our views here. Let's create the lecture. Let's create our view for Mongo here. So let's say a directory here for Mongo, and let's put here our index page in here. So it's HTML. Actually, not an HTML page. We want an EJS here, right? So a brand new file. Let's say index.ejs, and in here we'll just say we'll call it h1, and this will be our EJS Mongo lecture. Okay, very good. So that's under where? That's under the directory views, under lecture, Mongo, and then index.ejs. So in our app, we're gonna create a very quick. I'm gonna say app.if you get a get for lectures or lecture, EJS/Mongo. If you get that request, then I want you to render. I want to render that view we just created. We're going to say response.render. Oops, something went wrong. Res is not, oh, we forgot this, right? This is request response. Let's restart the server. Try it again. Okay, so we're in there, right? We're in that EJS file. We're in that EJS file. Okay? Okay, so what do we want to do here? Let's create an application where all of you can register, right? You can put your first name, last name, your email, your phone number, right? And you'll register, and I'll use all these registrations so that I can then click a button and it'll randomize, right? It'll randomize you on when I should grade you. Okay? Those that don't register will be graded first. Okay, so register. Okay, make sure you register in here. Okay. Then I'll click a button and it'll randomize you. Right. I'll use your phone to text you that I'm about to grade you. Yes. To send you a text real quick that to please stop working because I'm about to grade you. Right. Or make sure you push your latest so that I can grade you. All right. Let's see. So in our index, let's bring Bootstrap. So link. Let's Bootstrap. Where's Bootstrap? So Bootstrap. We want Bootstrap CDN. So let's bring Bootstrap here. Come on. So this will be href. And it's a style sheet. Okay. And I will put this in div class container. See, that should have rendered. There we go. All right, that looks much better. And I'll say here H2. We'll call it register for a final project grading. Okay, and in here we'll put maybe a table, class table, and we'll put here in the heading, we'll put a row where you can enter. Actually, the whole thing will be a form. The whole thing will be a form. One big form that you can submit. Okay, and you can submit th. You can submit your first, last, your email, your phone, your URL for where your project should be hosted, and your GitHub. Okay, so I'll put here first. This will be last. This will be email. This will be phone. This will be OpenShift, and this will be GitHub. Okay. All right. So there it is. Field will be TR. We have TD here, and this will be an input field, input. Notice I'm going to use name. Notice that there is no AngularJS. There's no AngularJS, no model, no controller, nothing of that, right? The controller, but there's still a controller, but the controller is not running on the client in JavaScript. The controllers are web services, right, that are running on the server, right, not on the client anymore. The model is an actual model that lives on the server. There is no intermediate scope, no intermediate model on the, right, there's still MVC. This will be first, right, and this will be class form control, right, and this, let's create a whole bunch of these, right. This will be last, this will be, what is it? Email. This will be phone. This will be OpenShift. And oops, am I missing one? First, last, email, phone, OpenShift, and then GitHub, right? GitHub. Okay, so we have that, those input fields. Okay, and we'll have the last one. We'll have a button where you can register. So TD, you have a button. Oops, TD. You'll have a button. Class button success, and you'll be able to say, this will say register. Okay. You click on register and you'll be added to the list, right? So when you click on that, it will go and will say the action will be to go to lectures / EJS Mongo, then register. And the method will be a post. Okay? That means that the server is going to receive the post of this form, right? And it's going to insert in the database. Yes? And then it's going to have to render the list of all the users who are registered, right? Or if the person's already registered or whatnot, you'll get some kind of error saying, oh, this person's already registered, blah, 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 whatever, okay? All right, I think we're out of time. We'll keep working on this on Thursday, right? So you can register and then we can have you randomize, right? All right, let's leave it here. I'm gonna be here all day, right? If you're gonna come over, well, not all day, I'll be here till 5 or 6 o'clock. I'll stay till 6, but if no one comes after 5, I'll leave early. Right, but if there's someone here, I'll see you until 6. All right? All right, thank you. So, you know, if you have doubts or if you need help with your project, please come see me. Right, if you have problems installing MongoDB or OpenShift or whatnot, right, come see me and we can work on it together. All right?
So the question I had before was really that we have our project content